Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with David Finoli for the second edition of Pittsburgh Sports, which hopefully will be a regular podcast on the Comfortably Zone Radio Network. Today we're going to talk about the first class of Steel Hall of Famers, essentially from the Super Bowl teams of the 1970s. Welcome, David.
Well, hey, Al, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. Wish the baseball season was going a little better, but
Oh God, man,
talk a little bit about.
they're brutal. I mean, that series with the Cubs was just, was, especially that last game, was just absolutely terrible. And the people on the Pirate Chat group were all over the front office for not doing anything, and I put down.
So this whole Nicasio thing was an absolute joke.
I put down that the only, since the last World Series in 1979, the only two stretches where they were really good were the one with Bonds, Drabeck and Company in the early 1990 through 1992, and the one where they just finished with 2013 through 2015.
Yeah.
Most of it's been down. I mean, this is not even humorous like the Ricky Dink boys back in the early 50s. This is just really, really sad.
Well, at least at that point they at least had a plan of some sort.
Yeah.
I question with this team, the thing that to me is more frustrating than anything is there's no plan. There's no direction. Are we retooling? Are we going through a wholesale reboot? Or are we going to try to add to 2018? Had they given all the good players away and gotten some good prospects in return, at least that's a plan. Would have frustrated me, but at least that's a plan of where they're going. This just, I don't know if they know what the hell they're doing at this point.
Now, well, you have a starting rotation this season with three rookies. Cool, Williams, and Talion, and that's very, very hard. Nova has leveled off, and their starting pitching, really, outside of Cole, has been pretty bad the last stretch of 20 games. I think they were 56 and 56 at one point when they had that hot. They've been 7 and 15 since then.
And Paul Zay said it best. I mean, he said that if you're going to do this, at least see what you got in September, and don't waste your time with Stewart, with Jaso. I mean, they're not coming back, and you have to see what Diaz can do. I mean, you try some of these other guys. Try Luplow. See what they can do in a situation. It's already lost. What's the difference between being in last place and next to last place? Bring Glasnow back. See what he can do. See what Nick Kingham can do, who's pitched very well after his surgery. But there's no plan. I mean, they tell us on one end Nicasio's gone. They want to give some people a chance, and then they play Stewart, claiming he calls a great game. Well, to me, a 190 hitter who calls a great game with a pitching staff that's been going towards double digits every game. I mean, why? Why not put in the kid and see what he can do over long stretches of time? I mean, it just makes no sense. There's, you don't want to say they're trying to lose, but they sure as heck ain't trying to win, Al.
Yeah, well, Detroit yesterday, which is in essentially the same situation, they unloaded Justin Upton to the Angels. They sent Verlander, who was a fixture there, to the Astros.
Yeah,
and the Astros are willing to absorb that contract, which still has 2 more years to run for a cool $50 million.
But, well, it's a tough time. But on the good end, I mean, the Steelers are they're doing something now that I thought I assume you think the same thing, that they should have been honoring these guys some way somehow in their stadiums for years. And had you had a chance to look at the list?
No, I haven't, but I can guess that the ones from that are in the Hall of Fame or being retired, like Bradshaw and Harris and Mean Joe Green and Swan. All the key players from that the dynasty back in the 70s.
Well, they're all there. What they did, they had a expert staff of some looked like some solid people, including the great Stan Savran, a fixture in Pittsburgh sports for years. The halls are going to be if I'm not mistaken, no less than 2, no more than 4 every year. But the first year, they wanted to add every guy in Canton who had played at least 3 years with the Steelers. So the first list is 27 strong. A couple things I found a little strange on it that I wanted to kind of pass by you. First off, they set that parameter. A couple of people mentioned about Len Dawson not being on the list, which I think is a correct thing because Dawson only threw 16 passes in 3 years.
Yeah, they passed up Jimmy Brown for him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And but they also didn't include Burt Bell, who was owner and part owner for 5 years, which I thought was kind of quizzical because certainly while he maybe didn't have his great time in Pittsburgh, he certainly is one of the great contributors in history. But they also added Johnny McNally and Walt Kiesling.
Kiesling?
Yeah.
God! What I've read about him that he was not particularly good as a coach.
Well, he from what I can gather, you're right. I mean, his most famous thing in Pittsburgh history is he sat Johnny Unitas.
Yeah.
As a coach. Not exactly sure what great talent he was. He was 30 and 55 as a coach. Probably most noted for coaching the Steagles with Greasy Neal and constantly arguing with Greasy Neal just about every practice.
And the next year they merged with the Cardinals and they went 0-10 and they were called the Carpets.
one of the worst teams in NFL history for sure. I mean, he played for 2 years with the Pirates in the late 30s. They pre-named to the Steelers back then, but he was really a Hall of Famer with Duluth and Pottsville and Chicago, the Cardinals. So I found it strange that you left Burt Bell off and included this guy who probably did more harm to your franchise than good.
Did this pass by some sort of board, or who set this whole thing up?
There was a board of, I want to say 4 or 5 people, including Art. Art had set the standard that he wanted the people from Canton who had been there at least 3 years, which most of the names on there are warranted. A couple people questioned. I was listening to 93.7 yesterday, and they were questioning Bobby Lane being included, which I disagree. I thought Lane was probably their best quarterback before Bradshaw. What do you think of that?
You're probably right. I mean, the first one when I started following back in the mid-50s was Finks.
Yeah.
But he was never, and when Lane at least most of the time had when he was there, had them, made them competitive. In fact, Lane, I think I said the last time, the people I hung out with there, we used to spend time at Gustine's, which is right down the stairs on Forbes Avenue from the dorms in Pitt. And Lane and his compatriots would have the back room there.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Yeah, he was very, very colorful, and he was he made them better than they should have been.
Right. I mean, he was a winner. Take away 1947. That era, he headed up the Steelers in the early '60s. Was probably the best era before.
Especially in light of all the horrendous draft choices they made during those years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other question I had was John Blood McNally, who seemed to be certainly a great player with Green Bay. But again, he certainly seemed, while he was here, partially as coach, partially as a player, to be more a thorn in Art Rooney's side than ever exhibited any greatness here. I was looking through a couple of websites, and there's more stuff on McNally with things he did off the field. He apparently was a huge drinker. He apparently any wild bet like Bob Prince did in his day that people would make with him, jumping trains, jumping off.
Oh God!
You know, I mean, this guy was more a character in Pittsburgh than a Hall of Famer. And as a coach, didn't show up to one of the games because he was decided to watch another game in another city at the time.
Oh God!
So I found that a little quizzical, leaving him off also. But they had some great players. People questioned Kevin Green. I thought Kevin Green, when he was here, was a phenomenal player and certainly deserving to be honored in such a manner. And one thing I'm going to throw by you, with all the talk of Bob Netting, what do you think people would think of Art Rooney today if the Steelers continued to be what they were in the 40s and 50s? I always find it.
Yeah,
I find it unique that he's held in such reverence in the city, yet, and he was a great human being. I mean, there's no doubt. But you look back at the things he did as an owner and the record he had. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, basically, I think that the one in baseball I can most relate to was Connie Mack after they broke up the team from the late 20s and early 30s with Fox and Grove and Cochran and Simmons, and got rid of all those guys, and they were pretty bad until the time they wound up selling out to the Kansas City interest. Yeah, for nothing on the field, basically. A couple of fourth place finishes, but that was about it. But it was because basically the history of the Steelers up until the 70s was not something to write home about.
No, and I just I mean, as again, great as a human being, great as a story as it was when he was handed the Super Bowl trophy in 1974. I mean, the team was nothing until his son took over.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, when you're rating the all-time greatest contributors, owners, coaches, what have you, I'm not sure Art Rooney would make it, if you're literally looking at the job they did during their tenure, would literally make it in the top 20.
He was, a founder, and he was lionized, and after they became good, basically all of that was forgotten.
Yeah. Oh, I remember.
They've maintained for most of the time since that first Super Bowl appearance a pretty decent record, and they've been one of the top teams essentially for years. That enhanced it. So when you have a situation like that, I mean, the first 20 odd years of the St. Louis Cardinals in the 20th century were pretty bad, and the first 20 years of the Yankees were pretty bad. But the success that they achieved after that basically erased the bad years out of people's minds.
Absolutely. As a good comparison would certainly be the Penguins since 1990. Pretty much a joke their first 25 years in the league. That certainly is completely forgotten at this point.
Well, that's what winning will do for you.
Absolutely. Now the other four, after they put through this class, they put a normal class of 4 players. So they put in the 23 guys that were Hall of Famers, and then they started this putting in 4-year thing. The 4 guys they chose were Elsie Greenwood, Donnie Shell, Andy Russell, all of which I think you would agree certainly borderline Hall of Fame candidates, or certainly deserve in the conversation about being included in the Hall of Fame. But the 4th guy they put in that kind of made me shake my head a little was Dick Hoke.
Yeah, I remember him. He was there in the early 60s.
He was. He was an average running back and certainly a long-time running back coach.
Wasn't he from Penn State?
He was from Penn State. He was a local kid. I want to say lived in Jeanette. I'm not sure if he was from Jeanette, but he's from the area, and it was certainly a fixture in the coaching staff of Chuck Knoll and Cowler, and I believe he did kind of stretch through the Tomlin era for a little bit. But again, if you're putting in a 4th guy, is Dick Hoke the so-called contributor? I'm assuming he's in there as a coach. Or would you go to some of the other coaches, or even Myron Cope, Bill Nunn, who, in my eyes, changed the way people scouted in the NFL? What would you think would be someone you'd like to see there as more a contributor who wasn't a Hall of Famer?
Well, basically, if he's not in there playing, I think that being an assistant coach for years really doesn't make the cut. I mean, there's nobody like that in the baseball Hall of Fame, or even with the retired Yankee numbers. A couple of them got like Crissetti. Frank Crissetti was a third base coach for many years, wore number 2, which of course was retired for Derek Jeter. But there's no. I don't think that they put any assistants in there, and the length of service to me is not under those circumstances are not a qualification.
Absolutely not. And I would even think of Dick LeBeau, who created some great defenses, who's in the Hall of Fame more in my eyes because he was a tremendous player.
Did Myron Cope actually work for the Steelers, or did he just cover them for years?
Myron Cope covered them. I mean, he was synonymous with the Steelers. He never worked for them. I wondered if that, what your thoughts were on an announcer being included in such a esteem in a team he didn't really work for.
No, that I can't agree to. I mean, the only announcer the Yankees have ever honored was Bob Shepard, who was their PA announcer for forever. But as far as the broadcast people, no, I don't. They have to be in their own separate wing because they have no say in the drafting or who plays or any of that. So I think that basically scouts, I can see if you have a scout that recommended. I know the '74 draft was amazing. If you have scouts or player personnel people that recommended all these selections, most of which turned out to be extremely good, then they should be considered.
Absolutely. I mean, Bill Nunn, to me, I mean, he was. While other people were still looking at the so-called Power 5 teams, he was the one to go to the traditional African American colleges and steal some of the great players that nobody was looking at. Elsie Greenwood. I mean, many players on this list. John Stallworth, Mel Blount.
Even Mean Joe Green didn't exactly come from a football powerhouse either.
No. Texas State. But I think his contribution, certainly would deserve honor here before Dick Hoke, who again, a guy who's a coach for that long, certainly had a proud place in the history of the franchise. But again, if you look back at what he contributed. If he was on one of the great teams, he would have probably been more of Reggie Harrison than a Franco Harris. He was the best of a lot of guys that included Earl Gross. So, there wasn't a lot of top-notch talent past John Henry Johnson that came through Pittsburgh in the 1960s.
Did they put in anybody from the 50s and early 60s in there besides Ernie Stotner?
The only people were the Hall of Fames. They had, Blaine, as I said, John Henry Johnson is in there.
Yeah.
Stotner, of course. Jack Butler.
In there. Yeah.
And Bill Dudley in the list.
But nobody like Chattanooga or Ray Matthews or L.B. Nickel or any of those types.
And you make two good comments there on certainly on Matthews and Nichols. Certainly, hopefully, will be considered in the near future among the best at their positions during that time period. And
I know during those years they played the Giants very tough.
That they did. What year was it when they went to New York with a chance to win the division? Do you remember?
That was 1963. That was my senior year.
Boy, that was an unusual year in Pittsburgh football. With
they had three ties. And the game in the Yankee Stadium was on television in Pittsburgh. That's where I watched it because the Giants. You could never. When I was here, you could never get Giant games on home TV in those years, and the Giants beat them, and then the Giants were beaten by the Bears in the championship game, and then they went into the tank for the next 20 odd years.
Were the Steelers a good team at that point, or
they were
the team kind of skating by?
Also, they had three ties, and when they lost that game, because I think it was the Cardinals and the Browns both had better records than the Steelers, so when the Steelers lost that game and went to 7-4-3, both the Cardinals and the Browns, I think, were 10-4 and finished ahead of the Steelers, because the tie games essentially in those years they threw them out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so they didn't go by percentages back then.
Yeah, they went by percentage, and in those days, of course, they didn't have any overtime.
Right.
So it was Ed Brown was the quarterback, I believe, on that team.
Yes.
Steelers,
you're right.
Because Lane had already gone.
I believe you're right. Now, Buddy Parker, what do you remember about him?
Buddy Parker was he took over the Lions, I think, in 1951, and made them into a championship team. They won in 52 and 53, and they lost to the Browns in 54. Lane was the quarterback there. And then right before the 1957 season, he says, this team stinks. And he walked out on them right before they started training. And, of course, this guy, George Wilson, took over, and they wound up winning the NFL championship, which was the last time that they've won anything in the NFL. And they've only been to one championship game since then, in 1991, and they were buried by the Redskins. And, so he came to Pittsburgh, and what he did was he brought Bobby Lane in the next season and turned them into a team that was very, didn't really win anything, but they were respectable. They became competitive, and from what I understand, he had a little bit of a drinking problem. And finally, I guess, with most coaches, especially coaches that like to impose discipline, their messages wear thin after a certain time. Yeah, I don't know I remember when his last year was. It might have been a year or two after Bobby Lane retired, but he did, I think, a pretty good job in the time he was there, given what he had to work with.
Yeah, he retired. He won't, I think, one more year, if I'm not mistaken. 64 is when he was done.
There's a couple of draft busts I remember were Bob Ferguson from Ohio State.
Yeah.
And then they made a deal where they sent Buddy Dial to Dallas for, I think, the first round pick, and they took a tackle from Texas named Scott Appleton, who went and signed with the Houston in the AFL. So they got nothing for him.
Oh man! So basically, those are more examples of art not.
Yeah.
Not having. Was it Gary Glick, the guy they
yeah, that was the bonus pick. They had a
team?
bonus pick in the NFL for a dozen years, and every team got one shot. And when the Steelers came up, they took Gary Glick, who I think was from Colorado State.
Colorado State, he was.
Yeah, and who nobody had ever heard of. And he turned out to be nothing.
If the story's correct that I heard, they scouted him through a Street and Smith's football
Yeah.
which this is certainly as I said, I mean that to me would have frustrated the heck out of fans if he had done all this. Now they forgot all this when the Steelers started winning, but again, the Steelers back then also didn't have to deal with the extreme mass media that teams do today.
No.
Where certainly all these moves would have been magnified in 20 different ways and discussed in 20 different ways on Facebook and such. Can you imagine the people in some of the groups on there?
With the sports calling shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because occasionally I listen to them. I've cut down on that quite a bit because it's just too much. But you get these you get these Jets fans. The Jets are still living off that Super Bowl, which is 48 years ago. They've been pretty horrible most of the time since. These Jet fans call up and say, well, if we do this, well, if we do that, then the Jets may be on the track to lose every game they play this season.
Yeah, they look pretty lousy. Supposedly yesterday they announced that all their offensive line starting positions are still up for grabs.
Yeah, they may join the 2008 Lions, who went, who's a product of the great general manager Matt Millen.
Absolutely.
And they went 0-16. It's the only team that has done that since they went to the 16-game schedule.
Absolutely. On the good end, we have a good one here in Kevin Colbert, who signed a new contract yesterday, two more years through 2020. I thought made a move that made them legitimate, true Super Bowl contenders by signing Hayden from the Browns. What do you think about that?
Well, basically, one of the guys on Pittsburgh criticized that because this guy was released by the Browns. But he may be one of these guys that can't stand playing for a loser. I mean, there are a number of players, basically, who are mediocre to bad teams and wind up going to New England.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they go from a loser to a winner, and their whole attitude changes.
Well, at 28 years old, and certainly he's had a couple injury-plagued years in a row, which probably led to that. But you're right. There's a lot of guys that probably don't enjoy playing on a losing team, and when you're not playing on a team who's very good, sometimes you're getting the best receivers left and right, and if you can't get a rush on the quarterback, that's going to make any defensive back look.
Doesn't matter how good the defensive backs are. I've been saying that for a very long time. And Sports Illustrated came out. I got their Pro Football Preview issue in the mail the other day, and they have the Steelers winning the AFC North with an 11-5 and going all the way to the AFC Championship game, the way they did last year before succumbing to New England. But who knows? I think it's going to be very, very competitive this season.
Which I agree with, and I think as Brady gets older, and if this allows them to, with Artie Burns, who is a seemingly great potential cover guy. If they can go more man-to-man and get out of that zone against Brady, they have a much better chance to beat him. And if somehow...
They're still playing a 3-4, right?
Yeah, they're playing a 3-4. They're playing a zone in the defensive backfield, which makes them appear to be a bend but don't break defense. Which against Brady, you break. I mean, that's the greatness of Tom Brady.
Yeah, because I watch the red zone because here they're not on very often.
Yeah,
and I discovered the red zone where they go from game to game with no commercials, and if the game is in a stoppage for one reason or another, they go to, especially the 1 o'clocks, they have about eight or nine games going, and that's the way I've been able to watch them over the last few years.
That is absolutely addictive. If I'm not at the Steeler game or watching the Steelers, that's exactly how I watch the NFL. I think that's just the neatest way to watch the other games. I'm not much of a fan of any of the other teams, so it's for me it's the best of all worlds there.
Yeah, the only thing I like to see the Cowboys lose for a variety of reasons, and this goes back way before Jerry Jones. This goes way back.
Yeah, absolutely. People look at me weird when I root against the Raiders. Those who didn't live through the 70s to experience just the bitter rivalry between both the Raiders and the Cowboys.
Yeah, the Raiders over the last bunch of years, they haven't been very good.
And I've enjoyed every minute of that. I'll tell you that much. But they certainly look like they have potential this year.
So we get here basically a Jets and Giant games. The Giants, can watch them for a while. The Jets are, it's becoming a question here whether they could beat Ohio State or Alabama.
Well, that is a real shame, and looking at, it all starts with the drafts, and looking at some of the things the Jets have done lately. I mean, it's no shocker that they've
essentially been totally mismanaged ever since Namath, the days of Namath.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter who they bring in, who their quarterback is, who their coach is, who the general manager is. It's all it's a total disaster. We have them, and the other total disaster here is the Knicks basketball team.
Yeah,
which is another team that's been around for 70 years. It's had three decent periods in their entire 71-year existence. So
I'll tell you what, that team in the early 70s, that was the best of all.
Yeah, when the Steelers came in with the 70s, all of a sudden, as I said before, it just with their success, especially being the Cowboys in the Super Bowl twice, wiped out the memory of the 35 years or so that they were, they were a bunch of bunglers.
Yeah, and that is what it takes. I mean, it's you bring in better management, you bring in better people. Penguins were the same way. Had one bad general manager and ownership group after another until they decided, let's bring in Craig Patrick, Scotty Bowman, and Bob Johnson. And
whoever heard of Ben Roethlisberger playing for Miami of Ohio?
Well, not me.
The MAC is not exactly a powerhouse conference.
No,
but he's been terrific for. He looks like he's getting better as he gets older.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've put the best offensive line, or one of the best offensive lines in football, in front of them with an array of talented receivers and running back that, I mean, would make most quarterbacks seem great, but a great quarterback just seemed phenomenal at his age. I mean, I think the defense is going to be much better than people expect. I know I'm hearing a lot of complaints about how they played in the preseason. Well, he doesn't show off the blitz packages. He's not going to show teams the various things. This is very common for Mike Tomlin in the preseason. And I think they've made great improvements on the defensive side. and this offense, there's no reason they can't score 30 to 35 a game.
No, not with because they have lost receivers to free agency in other years, like San Antonio Holmes and what was this, Manuel Sanders and Wallace, but they're replaceable. And as long as they hold on to Antonio Brown, who's a game breaker, that'll be no problem. They can always weave in like the Patriots do with Edelman went down, and I'm sure that he replaced Wes Welker, and I'm sure that the Patriots will have somebody in there to replace Edelman without much loss of efficiency.
Oh,
that's the way it is.
This kid they got in the second round from USC, Juju Smith, he looks like Hines Ward.
Oh wow, that's a high compliment.
I mean, he goes in the middle. He like Lynn Swann, he'll catch a ball no matter how many people are on him, and he loves to hit. So I mean, they made a tremendous grab with him in the second round. People wondered why they did, and if you watch him play, you learn real quickly why they did.
Yeah, they open up with the Browns this year, I think.
Absolutely. So that's one they have to take advantage of in a big manner. I mean, I like some of what the Browns did, but then again, you have no confidence that that they're going to not kind of blow it all up stupidly. Until you see that this new regime isn't going to be like the last one, there's no reason to think the Browns are going to be anything more than.
No, they've been pretty pathetic. This is the second Browns franchise, and they tries the two of them together. I said the original Browns are in Baltimore now.
Yeah,
and
this again could pick themselves with the success the Ravens have had.
No, I thought that when Modell took that team out of Cleveland, I thought that was criminal.
It was.
Yeah.
On the other end, I understand why people get upset at the tax paid facilities, but the amount of money I did an article for a book called Baseball, and it dealt with franchise relocations in baseball, and the amount of money that cities lose by not having these in taxes. And I mean, there are people that say, well, they'll spend money elsewhere, but it never gets proved. They don't spend money elsewhere. And you lose the money. I mean, the Penguins have generated, when they go to the finals, generate an incredible amount of money for the city's economy just in a 7-game series. But the Browns it happens all the time. They lose the franchise, then they spend the money to build the stadium. The municipal stadium was a pit.
I know that. I saw some baseball games there over the years. Yeah.
So did I. I mean, I've never been to a Browns game there, but I've been to plenty of Indian games there, and it's a pit. I understood why he wanted to get there, but you're right. I mean, at that point in time, from his standpoint, he looked down, he saw they were building the Jake, they were building the Q Loans Arena in downtown, and there was no money left for him. But somehow, a couple of years later, they found that money. So I thought
I contended that the National League, did a number on Milwaukee because they held the Braves to the last year of the lease.
Yeah.
Even though that ownership bought them for the specific purpose of moving them to Atlanta. So when it came in the expansions in 1969. The National League gave it to Montreal and San Diego. And what happened, the way Milwaukee got the Brewers, was that the Seattle Pilots went bankrupt about 2 weeks before the season started in 1970, and Milwaukee was the only place that had a Major League Stadium that was available.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's how they wound up with the Brewers.
Absolutely. Oh, but you reminded me of those Pilot days, which I always got a kick out. I was a little kid then, but I got a kick out of that hat they had.
Oh, the Pilots? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They were immortalized with Jim Bouton's book.
Jim Bouton's book. Oh,
yeah.
Man. But and certainly Milwaukee has supported that team ever since. That was a good baseball town in the late 50s with the Braves. I mean, it was a good baseball.
Yeah, when a team that gets supported, they decide to move because it's more money. I mean, the
Right.
classic case here was the Dodgers. A number of people who are old enough to remember this still have never forgiven Walter O'Malley.
Right.
But, yeah, a lot of politics went on here, and they offered him the moon in L.A., and he went.
Well, so, and it all worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
it all worked out. I'm not sure baseball could have supported 3 teams going forward.
No, baseball, well, the Giants were supposed to move to Minneapolis.
Right.
And then O'Malley convinced Stone to move out to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then
smart move.
Yeah, they took him out to Candlestick Point when it wasn't windy. When we got there in the afternoon, the only time I ever was there, I was out there with a friend of mine, 73. We couldn't work the Giants in because the A's were in. So we went out to Candlestick Park, and they were cleaning it up after an exhibition football game. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. The wind is blowing the papers and hot dog wrappers and all the other garbage all over the place. And apparently when they took Stone out the first time to see it there, that, it was calm.
Oh,
but, the Giants really, they built the Met Stadium in Minneapolis, which was the first ballpark that the Twins play in because the Giants were supposed to move there.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, that was certainly a classic park in its own. My memory of that is the Vikings in the snow. Those great Viking teams of the late 60s, early 60s.
Yeah, Grant wouldn't allow gloves or space heaters there. Teams like the Rams and the 49ers, coming from California, and they'd be practically beaten before the game even started.
Oh, man, absolutely. But all right, Al.
All right.
It's been great talking to you.
Yes.
I look forward to
try again next week.
Podcast.
Try again next week, same time?
Same time, same place.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, Al.
Okay. I'll just say goodbye, everybody. Same bad time, same bad channel next week. Thank you, David.
Bye-bye. Al.